Okay, I'm going to do my best to explain a really complicated topic as simply and quickly as I can here. This is the World War II campaign in Africa. The Northern African campaign, they call it the Desert War, took place between 1940 and 43, and it involved both the Germans, the British, and the United States eventually. We're talking Algeria, Egypt, Libya, Morocco, Tunisia, the northern area against the Mediterranean. And there's two reasons. They really originally fought between the British and the Nazis over the Suez Canal, which controlled the Middle East. And the second was of oil. And this is a mechanized war. They needed, both armies desperately needed oil. This is, again, the area we're talking about here. The Americans get involved in a little while. The first part of fighting in Egypt and Libya takes place primarily between Rommel and Montgomery, the two commanders of the Nazis and the British. So by mid-1942, the United States is in the war. The Americans finally agreed that we would attack Northern Africa, where we would hope we'd link up with the French forces and support this. It looked pretty obvious that we did not have the means to invade France by 1942. That wouldn't come for another 2 years. So we went into Africa, and this is the type of landscape we're fighting in. I mean, this is high desert, barren, open landscape, and this is what the first fighting American troops took part in the European theater of operations. What was the goal? We were a couple reasons. We wanted to relieve pressure on the Russians. If we attack the Germans in northern Africa, they have to move resources away from Russia in the Eastern Front, and hopefully that would help the Russians out a little bit. Stalin really wanted us to attack France, but we just weren't ready to do that yet. Here are tanks operating. Tanks do not like to operate in the sand. It gets into everything. Secondary objective really was open up the Mediterranean. You're looking for further operations against Europe, primarily the invasion of Sicily and Italy. So they were going to use northern Africa as a kind of a base of operations to invade the underbelly of Europe. And there are quite a few pictures of these guys. There's I want to say these are French, but I could be, of course, wrong on that one. So Operation Torch, which you should know here, is the American invasion of northern Africa. The guy chosen to be the Allied commander was Eisenhower, who became the supreme Allied commander in Europe after D-Day. Later, of course, became a two-term president of the United States. Very well respected. They chose him not because he was necessarily the best general, but he was the most respected general. He was really good at handling these egos, especially dealing with guys like Patton and Montgomery, who were very happy, or let's just say we could say that they were very confident. That might be a nice way to put it. So again, here's Europe. Nazis have basically all this under Nazi control, and we're here. We want to invade, but we're not ready yet. They're fighting in the east a lot. So if we come in here and do some fighting in this area, later on they took Sicily and then worked their way up this way, and that was really the idea. Also to kind of season our troops a little bit. The Axis powers in northern Africa were really Germans and Italians. They had about 100,000 guys. The guy in charge was Field Marshal Rommel, Erwin Rommel, one of the best Nazi commanders they had. The French had about 100,000 guys as well, but it's hard to figure out what was going on with the French because of maybe some split factions following the takeover of the Nazis. So we're not really going to dwell on the French. Rommel, nicknamed the Desert Fox, was really well known for his flair and his tanks, leading with tanks. He also was in charge of building up the coastal defenses for Normandy. He gets wounded, just to get a little ahead of ourselves, gets wounded in July 44 after the Allies invade. During this Valkyrie, the movie Valkyrie, the attempt to kill Hitler, Hitler suspects Rommel. He gets kind of thrown into that. It's kind of unknown whether he was part of that, but they gave him a choice. Choose suicide. We'll give you a hero's funeral, take care of your family, or we're going to try you, execute you, and ruin your whole family. He ended up killing himself, which is a big loss for the Nazis. Good for us. These are Stukas operating in Africa as well. So they had their whole armament there. So again, this is important. It's widely overlooked most of the time, but the Mediterranean was vitally important for the British. They drew Axis, again, taking Axis forces away from Europe, and but the negative is it delayed this second front that Stalin desperately needed. We weren't able to open that second front really until we invaded in Normandy in June of '44. So artillery at night. So the problem when you talk about the Africa campaign is it really is all about supplies. Whoever had the best supplies at the time was winning. If you look at both Rommel's army and the British army, it's who has the advantage goes back and forth, and it really depends on who has the supplies at that moment in time. They were both well led with tough guys fighting hard. This is Germans out there in the middle of that. Just again, it gives you an idea of the landscape these guys were fighting in. It's amazing. So if you look at the weapons, Rommel Africa Corps really was more advanced and more effective than both the United States and the British, which allowed them to make it. They lasted longer because they were good. But he didn't have enough stuff to allow a strategic victory. Only enough, again, to prolong defeat, which is important. Give you an idea, in 1941, the British 8th Army had 118,000 men. The Nazis won 113,000. The British had 680 tanks. Rommel 390. They had another 500 in reserve. The British had 1,000 planes. The Nazis had 320. So really, even though the Africa Corps of the Nazis was better, and one British tank wasn't equal to one Panzer tank, it didn't matter. They had enough of them to overcome that. This is a picture of these tanks operating out in open battle. You had some pretty famous pitched tank battles out there in the middle of the desert. Here's guys. I want to say, now I could be wrong, so don't quote me, but I think this is a British Matilda tank. But again, I could turn around. This could be a Nazi tank, easily. So don't come get me. All right. So literature, it goes on and on. There's two main battles. Rommel's crown and glory is this Gazala in 42, and Montgomery's is the famed battle El Alamein in October of 42. That's really both those guys crown jewels. This is a tank that's turned into an actual artillery position up here. So El Alamein, probably the only one that's being on our test. This is October to November 42. It's a offensive battle. He used deception, and surprise, and I'm not going to get into the whole details. It's complicated. If you are interested, there's plenty of literature online on El Alamein, and there's also online interactive maps that'll show you. But basically, Montgomery won. He did a good job. This is Patton in Africa too. Patton got a lot of his, became very famous in Africa, leading his army. So Montgomery, it worked. He did it really well. It was a set-piece battle, meaning he planned it out ahead of time. The Africa Corps was crippled. They didn't have enough gas. All right? And this is the beginning of the end for the Axis in North Africa. That's why we care about El Alamein, the beginning of the end. These are Hurricanes, British Hurricane fighters operating in the northern Africa. Both Hitler and Churchill interfered. It's the problem when you have modern communications. They want offensive action. They don't want, because again, it's political. They want to tell everyone at home that things are going well, and they became obsessed with needing offensive action. Where if you're offensive action out in the middle of the desert, you're easy to destroy. Churchill specifically needed something for morale reasons alone. They're getting bombed nightly. Here's Montgomery with the King, King George, coming out to visit the troops with Montgomery, who, again, is not a very imposing figure, but a very good general. So in late 42 here, Rommel tells Hitler, hey, we need to, that a delaying attack is not going to help us, all right? Rommel was overruled, and Hitler was very preoccupied with everything going on in Russia, and the people come back and say it cost Rommel some of his tanks and a last chance to regroup. But whatever the reasons, they lost. That is a captured Tiger tank, and you could just get, that's a German heavy tank, and they're feared tanks. Those things could take a beating, and that's kind of some of the stuff that they were fighting with, the Nazis were fighting with. So, cost, you're looking at 16,000 French killed. In the British Empire, they had 53,000 killed. wounded or captured casualties. You know, the Americans, we did pretty well. But again, we didn't get involved in this entire thing here. 2,700 killed, 9,000 wounded, and 6,500 missing. For the Germans, 12,000 killed. This is what really killed them. 100,000 plus captured. Total access with the Italians, you're almost 1 million casualties. 8,000 aircraft destroyed. 6,200 guns destroyed or captured. 2,500 tanks destroyed or captured. And that's the kind of toll that really Hitler could not afford to have happen. And here, last slide here is they have cemeteries still. This is in World War II. They bury the dead over there, and it's cemeteries in northern Africa. So again, I hope that just gave you an opportunity to just get an overview of what was going on in northern Africa. If you are interested, please go online and take a look. There are plenty of resources out there to help clarify the conflict.